This is Jean Nathan. It's Crosstown Conversations, and I have with me some very informed and intelligent and resourceful and important people who are concerned about the environment of our region. So I'm going to be giving them wide berth to talk about their concerns. And Aron called me saying, we've got to do something about the fact that the candidates, especially the mayoral candidates and the council candidates, are not paying attention to the environmental issue the way they should be. And I couldn't be more sympathetic to us seeing how we can put some pressure on. So Aron and Sage, why don't you both introduce yourselves really quickly? Aron?
Sure. Aron Chang. I've been working on water issues in New Orleans since 2010, 2011, and thankful to be in conversation with you all. I'm a worker owner at Civic Studio, a worker co-op based in Central City. Environment and water are primary areas of focus for our co-op. And then I'm also one of the co-founders of the Water Leaders Institute, through which we work with community leaders and elected officials and technical experts to build capacity, community capacity to address our water and climate challenges.
Sage.
Yes, I go by Sage Michael. I work with Healthy Gulf, and I am the Climate Justice Organizer and Fellowship Program Manager. I come by way of water by connecting with a project in New Orleans East called Lincoln Beach. And we are working not only to bring back this project that's outside the levees that's been closed down since the 1960s, but we are working to also transform the canals in New Orleans East to connect communities, improve water quality, and to use our water as a resource and not a waste. I definitely enjoy connecting communities and peoples and cultures with water and building community power and making sure it's equitable for the process moving forward. That community is at the table making decisions for projects that matters for them and their lifestyle.
So I don't have as robust a resume in water as I'm hearing from you all, but the Creative Alliance of New Orleans has been significantly committed to addressing environmental concerns through the arts and through the creative industries in the broader context. And I think that the arts have been more and more important in helping to call attention to environmental concerns. It's been a trajectory that I've noticed since the 60s, believe it or not. I'm that old, and it has been more a part of the arts community than you guys might realize. But as way back as the 60s, there were quite a few people working in the arts who were trying to call attention to environmental concerns. So we're continuing that in one of the most environmentally challenged areas in the world. Since we have so much shoreline that is threatened by climate change. And yet at the same time, theoretically, we have the opportunity to be a model. And I think that is really what we're looking at right now is the opportunity to be a model and do a better job of it. With me is Arturo Perez, who has he's not a signed up member of the Alliance for the Creative Alliance of New Orleans, but nobody is. We're just an organization that tries to reach out to folks. But I would say that his commitments include also, in addition to the creative industries, environmental concerns. Am I fair in saying that?
Yeah.
Okay, so he has been helping me get through many aspects of what I do, including the technical, which had I called him sooner about not being able to get onto the new Zoom format, he could have maybe done that this morning. Anyway, let's go ahead. Let's dive in. Aron, you called me and said, we've got to put more pressure on. Why?
Yeah, I think the issues that we're facing in New Orleans they're existential. When you talk about a city where half of the city is below sea level, where you have regular flooding from rain events, when you're celebrating the 20-year anniversary of Katrina, when you're talking about the resilience and the spirit of the city, But then you look on, until fairly recently, you look on campaign platforms, on their websites, and you would see no mention. Everyone was talking about public safety, economic development, government services, maybe a little bit about infrastructure and doing better there. But not a word to be seen around what is our response to climate change? What's our relationship to coastal restoration projects? How do we build on the community efforts from the last 10, 15 since Katrina, focusing on green infrastructure and resilience? And so I think going in a 4-year term, even an 8-year term, 2 terms is not that much time when we're talking about crises that are decades and centuries in the making. And so the time frame for anything substantial, like building a levee or restoring a wetland, these are decade-long projects. So we have to be coming into the election season, coming into any new administration, any new term for a council member, for a city assessor, for a mayor, ready to take these on, and having done the research and the thinking and been hosting the conversations in order to understand the interrelatedness of all these issues and how they connect to the things that people say they care about: insurance and affordability and housing and economic development. All those things are deeply intertwined with the land and the water. And so I just wasn't seeing a deeper understanding or a real interest in addressing these issues almost across the board. And that felt like a real shock to me. And so I've just been doing my best to reach out through an op-ed in the Lens and through conversations with people like Sage Michael and you and people throughout the community, to talk about how do we show these candidates that there's no excuse for not paying attention to these issues, and we need you to be better prepared. Whether you're elected or not, we need you to be better prepared in any position of leadership, because it's really going to require a whole of government approach and cross-sector approach to address these massive issues.
So Sage, how do you come to this issue, and where's your focus? And I'm sure that you agree with Aron about the need for the pressure, but more specifically, what is the area that you feel has to be motivated and moved primarily?
One thing, what I've noticed in New Orleans, and just kind of add on to what Aron was saying, a lot of the city's efforts, when we see in the last, since Hurricane Katrina happened, has developed with this one-time funding, with FEMA funding, American Rescue, ARPA money, the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act funds, even possibly consent decrees made things happen, because Sewer and Water Board of New Orleans is under consent decree. Just like New Orleans Police Department was on a consent decree, Orleans Sheriff Department was on a consent decree, and why they call this Crescent City, it is almost consent decree city to me. Even as we talk about our waterways and how no one's really discussing the egregiousness of how people steward our waterways. I've learned recently through my own research of working done with the canals that the fairgrounds, very popular venue in New Orleans. The Jazz Fest is held there, very popular. But Churchill Downs, who owns and manages, who owns that property, was fined for polluting our waterways for years. They were fined one of the largest fines that the EPA levied against the entity for polluting our waterways. Right, and you can imagine a horse track. It has horse manure and horse urine, and with that going into our waterways, and they're fined now. Where is the outrage at that? And as people, we tend to blame nature for it. Like we say our water is dirty and it's polluted. Well, we polluted it. We allowed someone to pollute it because naturally it's not polluted. And dirty is something about perspective. We talk about clarity, and we have gumbo water in New Orleans. So we don't have that clear water like that clear blue water with a little salt and pepper in it. But we have a rich gumbo water and mineral rich in New Orleans. So I believe as though that it is a big disservice that our government only prioritized this stormwater management issue with one-time funding after a disaster. and the fact that it's not implemented throughout their budgeting process. And,
So,
and,
so, before you
go
go
ahead.
forward, so let me just, so what you're saying is that right now our policy is focused on storm water management and not on the broader issues of pollution in our waterways?
I would say that one-time funding stimulated a lot of this work, not sustainable funding, meaning a sustainable revenue source to move these projects forward in a way that transform from trying to control water and treating it as a waste, and but using it as a resource. And that's a different mindset that need to be had with management of water, away from the way it's been historically managed. And that's why I say that.
Can I ask you that, Gene?
Yeah.
So this question of like one-time sources of funding is huge. If you look at a lot of the work that's happening now, and there's been hundreds of millions that have been invested in things that we call green infrastructure, bioswales and rain gardens and rain barrels and other things like that. If you go back and look at where that funding comes from, like Sage Michael said, a lot of it is from FEMA, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, from HUD, National Disaster Resilience Program. You take the Gentilly Resilience District, for example, that's $141 million that's coming from the federal government. The problem, it's like great to get those one-time sources of funding, but the problem is they don't arise out of a democratic process where elected officials and taxpayers have negotiated this as a set of values. If you go back to where all that money came from, a lot of it came under the Landry administration. He established an Office of Resilience and Sustainability. A lot of that was funded by outside dollars. So Rockefeller, Fuse, they come in, and so you have outside entities coming in and funding a climate action plan, a resilience strategy. So even those aren't really funded by the city. And so the local stakeholders don't have much skin in the game. Council members weren't involved. The agency, Sewage and Water Board, DPW, Parks and Parkways, none of them were involved in the formation of these like seemingly foundational documents. So it's not really baked into the voter mindset, city council members. And so is almost like a bureaucratic, philanthropic approach to thinking about resilience. So it led to a lot of initial work, a lot of planning documents, and a lot of ideas, and then these bursts of funding. But what we've seen over the last 8 years is inability to follow through with even those one-time sources of funding. Like the Gentilly Resilience District, the money came in 2017. So we are now years behind schedule, and the money still isn't used. A lot of the projects have barely broken ground, and some haven't broken ground at all. And we're almost a decade in. And so that's one issue. And then the Sage Michael's point, we haven't found a way to get Sewage and Water Board, to get multiple city council members to actually go to bat and put their skin in the game and say, no, we need to appropriate funds entirely differently. We need to approach budgeting on an annual basis in a different way. So it's really, we're doing business as usual. And then we sprinkle in a bit of HMGP and NDR and these other, or some foundation comes in and helps somebody do a bit of planning. But it's not like, it's at a deeper philosophical level. We haven't actually made a real shift in our approach.
So the fact that we are have an organization called the Sewage and Water Board, which is a universe onto its own, not just an agency, but a universe. And it has had terrible troubles in trying to fulfill its mission over the years. I'm not sure I understand exactly why. I've been aware of it. I've been informed of it through my journalistic life. And as well as just being a New Orleans citizen, it's hard not to be aware of sewage and water board issues that affect you directly in every storm, in every little, rainstorm, as opposed to even big storms, big hurricanes or flooding events. So I think that one of the issues that happens is that if there's a separate agency that has a responsibility for work that is needed for the whole city, and the city is not directly involved in it. That's a problem. And that's been happening. And interestingly enough, LaToya Cantrell actually was kind of on this issue. She tends to get a lot of focus on the things she's done that are problematic. She doesn't necessarily get as much focus on something that made sense. Her policy has been to pull in some work that should be the work of the city from outside agencies. And those outside agencies, needless to say, were not happy about it. They didn't like having to share any of their money. But that's been a dynamic that has been part of the problem, that you formed this infrastructure over the years, probably to resolve the lack of commitment and interest in funding from the city, ironically. So you form a separate agency to chase funding and build a constituency of people on the board and in the organization that are theoretically more aligned with the mission. But in the end, what it does is it has made that agency somewhat immune to the impact of the government that represents all of us, and also does not encourage the kind of engagement from the community that city agencies have a responsibility to do. So is this something that you have focused on at all? And do you see this as a path that needs to be explored and maybe corrected?
Aron, you can take that first. I'll add it to it in a second.
Sure. I think question of Sewage and Water Board came up quite a bit at the mayoral forum that took place earlier this week on water and coast that took place at UNO.
Unfortunately, I didn't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, to me, Sewage and Water Board isn't. Yes, Sewage and Water Board can do its job better, and there are plenty of things that you could point at and say we need to improve this, billing and monitoring and this and that. But Sewage and Water Board also was set up to fight a fight that what it's trying to do is what we set up Sewage and Water Board to do, which was to drain the city. The reason we have neighborhoods in Gentilly and New Orleans East and Lakeview is because Sewage and Water Board was so successful at inventing and installing these incredible pumps that were so powerful that you could actually drain the swamp and the marshlands and start to build houses and pretend that we're living on dry land. That's what Sewage and Water Board was able to do. And so the interesting thing is when people say, we're going to stop flooding, we're going to fight flooding, make Sewage and Water Board do its job better, the better Sewage and Water Board does its job, the more we will sink as a city. The better they pump, the more effective they are, the more water we lose. And so there's an inherent contradiction there. And that's baked into the mandate of what Sewage and Water Board is trying to do. Not just Sewage and Water Board, but also Jefferson Parish Drainage Department, Lake Borgne Basin Levee District. All these entities have been set up to do exactly what we told them to do, which is pump every drop of water that lands out of the city. And so so we can blame Sewage and Water Board. And 8 years ago, that's exactly what was happening. We just had those rain events that caused a bunch of flooding. And it made water a big issue for that first LaToya administration. And I think we're back into a space of blaming Sewage and Water Board. And it's convenient for community leaders and elected officials to point a finger sometimes. But why are we pointing it? And what can Sewage and Water Board actually do? So I think, for example, Sewage and Water Board, their pumping removes groundwater every single day. Even on a dry, sunny day, there's water being pumped out of the city. That's the primary cause of why the parts of the city are sinking. But Sewage and Water Board is not in charge of groundwater. It is not in their best interest. They've not been told to manage groundwater. So we have to dig really deep and actually go back, not just to what you're talking about, Gene, in terms of where governance lies. And I know the mayoral candidates are talking about should the mayor be the head of the board, so on and so forth. How much does state control matter? How can we remove some of that state control? All that's super important. We got to figure out the bureaucratic, procedural aspects of it. But the fundamental mission, our fundamental relationship as a resident of New Orleans, when it rains, what is our expectation? Is it that the streets are dry within 30 minutes? If so, then we also have to live with more and more subsidence and the risks that come with that. So they're really hard decisions, but it has to be rooted in like a deeper understanding of why Surgeon Water Board exists, what they've been told to do, and when we tell them to do their jobs better, what that actually means.
Phew, that's kind of heavy duty, I have to say, to straighten out the underlying philosophy, policy, and expectations of a lot of people that are not that informed on the things that I'm hearing you talk about. I certainly wasn't even as informed, not surprisingly, really, but about the things you've been expressing. Sage, do you want to add to that perspective?
Yeah, sure. First of all, it's Surgeon Water Board of New Orleans, not by New Orleans. That's one thing. You got to kind of look at that too. And so the mindset was set a long time ago. But when we talked about, just kind of touched on when you talk about these projects that are set, we depend upon a government agency like Park and Parkways to maintain it. So if you look at the Pontilli project right now, we go past down Press Drive and you'll see all those permeable paving parking lots, parking spaces that are along Press Drive. There's grass growing out of all of it. Even the native plants that were planted in those bump out curves around the Pontilli area, people cut that off because they weren't valuing the native plants. They like, those are wild weeds, and that's messing up my green grass mentality. So it is the fact that having one-time funding and pushing these projects out with into the community without taking the time to build with community was a big misstep. But also not to have the sustainable funds to maintain these projects, to put it up on a parkway department that's already overburdened, can't keep up with the lots that they have taken right now. To say that every project coming by and every presentation I went by, Park and Parkways is the department to maintain these. And they're now receiving parity funding from the budget to make sure they have the maintenance. And what about the continual education with the community with these plans and these things are implemented are they even using these spaces? Are they going to these spaces? So without those connections, we are amiss. But here's this as well. So it was recently that we talked about this thing. How do we show people living with water? So we had a communications mission.
How do we show people? I'm sorry.
How do we live with water? Right? Let's show people how do we live with water, and what's the questions we will ask these people. So when my street flooded, it flooded recently. It flooded often when we have these heavy rainbursts. I know where I live. I know that these pumps need to catch up. I know that the gates are closed on my street, so waters that's falling from Chef Mentor could be pumped out into the canal, and then the gates on my street will be open once those pumps catch up. And I'm aware of the non-permeable surfaces in the runoff that's coming from Chef that's coming to Dwight to my home. However, I dealt with that by putting a kayak out of my yard, put my dog Lincoln on top, and go kayaking around my neighborhood. That was a post that went viral when I posted it some years ago, a couple of years ago when it had some rain. The post I put out just now had over 5,000 views when I reposted showing people how to live with water. And I do that as to draw attention to that. Let's not be so traumatic about this water that's on the street. Let's enjoy it for this period of time. The pumps will catch up eventually. We've seen this many times. Let's transform into a water transportation system just for a moment. And then when the pumps catch up, we'll be back to our cars. I really would like to remove and educate people away from the traumatic effects of water to the benefits and the healing effects of water. And I believe that needs to be done, educated, not just with the people, but with government entities. Oftentimes what we do with projects, especially like if we want to bring this education to youth, they have teachers. Well, we have to bring this education to teachers so they could teach the youth. It is a continually learning experience from people like me who have this lived experience and this emerging experience with being close to water. People like Aron, who's been in those worlds of those urban planning worlds, like that's not the way to be done. And Aron has a great mindset on how to build, community, educate equitably with community members. And this is the partnerships that come together for us to really challenge officials, to challenge government agencies to move forward.
So,
I'm also disappointed that water is not mentioned in these elections.
I'm sorry, disappointed that what?
I was disappointed that these water issues not mentioned in our election seasons because I'm aware that even when the city put money towards these green infrastructure projects, for example, the Mirabeau Garden, the city has to put matching funds up with a lot of these federal funds. There's matching funds that need to happen. And the city usually put bond funds to match these funds, which the city said, we're going to leverage these funds. We're going to leverage the bond dollars to get more money. Well, there's also like the several grants coming from federal government, other pass-through grants. The city has to put matching funds up. Now, I know this as a fact. When Garden Plaza residents rightfully do need it, there are $35 million to be properly relocated off that toxic land. The city decided to get that money from bond funds that were dedicated to stormwater management projects. I've seen a list of the payout. So Mirabeau Gardens, St. Anthony, all these projects got delayed because the city deappropriated those bond funds that went toward those projects to prioritize paying out the Garden Plaza residents. They also took $5 million bond funds that was dedicated for Lincoln Beach to pay out Garden Plaza residents. This all happens through the CAO office, through the Department of Resiliency, Office of Resilience Sustainability, through the Chief Resilience Officer. These all decisions are made with the mayor administration approved by City Council. So when we talk about government robbing Peter to pay Paul, and we have a city that say, oh, we have $35 million came from this fest. We have this from this Super Bowl. We have all these $1 million coming in the city. But when you come down to saying that Garden Plaza residents need their funds, but also we need these stormwater management projects, why do you have to take from something that's very important to pay something that was very important? When we see so much waste and abuse in our city for so many other things that they will put more money towards policing our city, but not protecting our city. Nothing will happen with a city that floods. Insurance rates are high. Utilities are high. Home values are low. Subsidence is happening. So this is why I can understand a city that's surrounded by water doesn't prioritize educating water, managing water, and that's a part of their budget.
So this actually resonates for me a lot because I'm surrounded with people, including close to me, who are smart and good planners, who feel that the only solution for people in New Orleans faced with the challenges that we're faced with for water is to move out and go north and get away from the shore. And that really bothers me. I don't agree with that. And I think we simply are not being as innovative, inventive, exploratory as we should be as to, again, what you guys are saying, how to use the water that we have more favorably to advancing the relationship between us, our people, our homes, our businesses, and water. So how would you do that?
Aron, give me a second on this. Let me catch this right quick. So when we faced migration because of a man-made disaster, look at how we were treated for the most part. Now, I can't say that everyone mistreated people who were migrating because of Katrina, but there are mass publicly known that we were labeled as refugees. There are facts that we couldn't go into neighboring parishes. The police was at the borderline for their city. We were shot at. We were looked at as criminals. We had corporations come by and take our city away. And so how do you plan for this is really we have to have planned migration for as citizens ourselves. We have to plan ahead that as the indigenous people, when the water flooded, they moved to higher ground. When the water receded, they came back. And so this is the relationship with living with water, not controlling it, so that when it does flood, and it will, we have a planned migration away who can do that. Not only a planned migration, but
So you're not really talking about migration.
we
You're
have to
talking
return to
about
the way. And I did some work
evacuation.
with out of
Am I right?
I-
That
I'm actually I'm actually talking about literally migration. It is a traversing the bridge back and forth. We must be able to move to high ground in a storm and come back to our home, right? When it dries out. And this is the way indigenous people in New Orleans functioned. When the river flooded, they moved to high ground. When it dried up, they came back down, and the bounty was plentiful. There was the colonizer way to make this a stationary port because they saw strategically advantage, right? This is a colonized mindset, and this is a colonist mindset that's been perpetuated today, and that's what must change. So, one, plan migration to make sure you plan. I know Aron in California, so I'm coming to Cali when they get a little tough, right? You know, my sister live in Atlanta, and that wave for my sister already had roots in Atlanta during Hurricane Katrina, gave us the comfort for my entire family to migrate and refuge to have a place to be in Atlanta until we're allowed to come back in our city. Not only that, we have to return to the way. The way meaning the natural way, the indigenous way. When indigenous people in a cutoff out of pocket Ishaks, they went on their boats and they went in the canal and they tied their boats down and they brought their medicine on the boat and all they needed on board. And their medicine wasn't nothing from Walgreens. Their medicine was these plants and the herbs and these tinctures they made, and they had their food and everything. So they have a relationship with the water. They knew where to go in the cove of the water where the wave wasn't so rough, and they put all their people on the boats. Sometimes it's better to be on the water than in a structure. And this is the thing about development. We are so stuck on this ground mentality, the street mentality. There are water communities around the world. And I'm like, why?
now you're talking my language. This is
Right,
exactly what I've been trying to say to
right.
a certain very close friend of mine who talks about just having to move out, go North Shore, go above that. And I said, wait, what about all these places around the world where people live literally on water? In water boats, on stilts, on various ways of accommodating it. I don't know if that's the best way to live. It's probably riskier than on land, so to speak. But
No, it's not riskier. It's not, no. Hear me out. It's not riskier. It is not. Listen to me. It's riskier for me to go to sleep at night in my house. I could get shot. And when you talking about risk in New Orleans, come on now. We've been through it all, baby. We've been through it all. So what I say is I will enjoy a water festival where we all on boats and we just pulling up on each other, send me the fruit, send me this, put the music on. Let's go to sleep on the boats. This is not traumatic. Let's transform into a water world. And when the water goes down, we back driving out, riding our bikes. It is not hard. It is so easy.
I just want to know how you're going to deal with the mosquitoes, because
No, but water dries away. It dries away. It doesn't stay. And we do have a pumping system. So I'm not saying get rid of pumps. I'm saying manage it differently, right? We do, if we want to be here, we do need that. But what I'm saying, when it floods, don't treat it as trauma. Treat it as an opportunity to enjoy the water while the pumps catch up. Like Aron said, if we want to streets dry, Aron taught us that curb 6-inch curb is designed for water to go into the storm drains. It's designed that way. So educate the people who are on risk land. Never allow a contractor to build their homes on the bottom of a slab if they know the water table will be this high if it floods. That was the problem that you had. They allowed these homes to be developed on the bottom of the bowl instead of having them above the water table.
okay. I'm listening to you two guys, and I have a tendency to um, notice the opportunity of someone to do things. Huh, Arturo. He walks into the Ford plant when we were doing an art show there, and I don't think he's gone a week without spending some time working with the Creative Alliance since then.
So I have a question for you guys. Aron, you brought it up about the sponge, right? Because the ground is a sponge. And the more that the sewage and water board drains, the sponge just collapses. Is there any work being done with water catchment that allows the drip to just replenish that sponge over time? I mean, there's many examples where, different cities have planned it where like a park would flood and allow for that catchment. Is there anything being done with these monies that has been allocated with that?
Yeah, a lot of the projects Sage Michael's referenced, Pontilli, Marabou Water Garden, which is under construction right now, they're all projects to create pockets of space to hold stormwater and to allow it to infiltrate into the ground. The New Orleans Redevelopment Authority really led the effort under Jeff Hebert to start with these vacant lot rain gardens, leveraging the assets they have in their portfolio of vacant land in New Orleans to start testing. The issue, though, is it goes deeper than that. The reason you can't really fluff up the sponge again is because operationally across the entire basin, we keep the groundwater level low. So if you're in a swamp or in a marsh, the water table that Sage Michael's talking about is just at your feet. You're in the mud already. And to make it feel like we're not in the swamp, we drain that water down 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet. So that whole top layer, that sponge is dry. And so we can infiltrate from these rain gardens, but that's only when it's raining. In between the rains, let's say there's 2 weeks in the summer and we're getting these big droughts, right? Drought periods where we go 3 weeks in New Orleans without rain in the middle of the summer sometimes, and it's 95 degrees. So when you have that ground is really dry, and Sewage and Water Board is not going to let that water rise up again because what they're anticipating is the next rainstorm. So the next rainstorm, 5 inches of rain fall, and that water table is higher, which is helping to reduce subsidence. If it's higher and that rain comes and there isn't space in the ground to absorb that or in the canals to hold that water and there's flooding, they'll get chewed out by the public and by the politicians because they're tasked with drainage. So it requires like a deeper mindset shift to the point that Sage Michael's talking about of like, oh, we can actually be okay. I live below sea level. I'm going to expect that there's a foot of water or 6 inches for a few hours. I'm going to pull out my kayak. We're going to change our school schedule and accommodate that when it rains so we don't have parents driving through floodwaters to try to pick up their kids at 2 p.m. because that's the only time. Like, it requires a deeper shift. And then I want to bring it back to like aesthetics and culture. G. Nathan, you started with that, right? That's your world. I think we have to go so much farther than just saying, hey, there are water villages and water communities around the world, and then using AI or painting in water onto our streetscapes and feeling like that's what living with water looks like. It goes to everything Sage Michael's talking about. It's so much deeper. It's our relationship to property rights and property values and property lines. If you draw a property line and you own that land, all of a sudden it's really damn hard to move. And so the idea that you could have a community that's able to flow with the water. So for thousands of years, people were able to inhabit the Delta and move with the seasons or move as a bayou jumped its banks and changed course or as a river changed course. But we've slowly over the last 300 years locked ourselves in our drinking water intake can only take water from the Mississippi at these 2 points, right? And so we're stuck. We have like a few days of water supply, and that's all we've got. And if anything happens, if the river changes course, we are so absolutely screwed. And we have no alternative to that other than like, you can't even truck in enough water to supply the whole city. And so at that point, you'd be evacuating the whole city. And so it's that that, as Sage Michael said, the colonizer mindset, the property lines, it's not just aesthetic. It's not just like, oh, I can put a kayak out. It goes into how you build your roads. It goes into your relation to private property. And fundamentally, I think a cultural problem, a cultural question, a cultural opportunity of what our relationship to that water is. Is it a beautiful thing that we can like actually relearn how to live with, or is it something that has to be pushed out? And so that's where I see the role of artists, culture bearers, cultural producers, is getting beyond the aesthetic stuff. We can look at pretty images of people on water all the time, but there's much deeper stuff, and that's where I think it's really inextricable from the political dimension. We need leaders who are willing to tackle some of these really hard questions, who are willing to even think about, oh my God, is there a contingency if the river changes course? It's inconceivable because we don't want it to happen. But if there's a study of the Yellow River floodplain in China over 1,000 years, every single city in that floodplain, the floodplain would silt up. They would build levees. Sometimes they'd build an extra ring of levees. The water, as the floodplain silted up, somewhat different relationship. And they didn't have the modern pumping that we use in New Orleans. But the relationships, the cities got lower and lower relative to the floodplain because the river would flood and add silt to the surrounding floodplain. Over 1,000 years, every single city first started with internal migrations. This neighborhood, oh wow, it's not inhabitable anymore. Water's coming out. Because water is always trying to equalize. It's trying to fill out. If you're below sea level, water's coming in at some point. It could be in 3 years. It could be in 50 years. It could be 100 years. Nobody knows, but it is, I think, unconscious. Like, it is morally, like, unconscionable to not, like, speak that and address that and speak that, like, truthfully to the people of New Orleans and to start thinking proactively about, like, so just that little conversation Gene, you and Sage Michael had about, like, what do you mean by migration? The problem is we don't talk about migration. So a planner, an engineer, architect, nobody can come in and say, you need to move. Nobody from outside should make that decision for you. But armed with the facts of, okay, I live at this level. It flooded these times in history. This is what the water table is like. This is how much we're spending to keep it dry. This is a risk. This is a vulnerability. What decisions do I make? Do we as a family, as a neighborhood, as a district decide to start building up? Do we start raising roads? Do we start shifting assets to higher ground? Chef Mentor that Sage Michael talked about is above sea level. Much of New Orleans East is not. So how then, if you're a council member, should you think about economic development or transportation routes or affordable housing if you just have that very basic knowledge of what's high ground and what's low? But we don't even incorporate that into our basic decision-making, planning, and policy-making. And that's where my concern comes from. Not that I have any easy answers or I think green infrastructure is the solution. It's that we haven't subjected these questions to democratic debate and people.
Okay, all right. Now, okay, here's why I want to come back to the question that I asked just a little bit before, and I got kind of lost because, anyway, it's been clear during this whole national catastrophic situation we've been involved in with this, what's the word? He is a declared nutcase that is in the White House. Okay, so that's going to get me off the air. But I think that we have seen that the pushback in the streets has been not conclusive in its impact, but has been the only factor that has actually challenged the desire for total, not just authoritarian, but just complete and anarchic control of our whole society, right? But we're at a really critical little moment here where we've done a lot of that street action, a lot of that pushback, and it has reminded people that people can impact change. Now, you guys are actually very clearly smart, on top of this subject, and deeply concerned and motivated. You have no choice but to be the leaders that you are talking about needing, one way or another. And throughout human history, and I think our species is kind of dumb, unfortunately, in too many ways, but throughout history, the only way change has been accomplished is through profound pushback by the people, whether it's been through revolution. And the argument for why we haven't had the revolution that some could argue we need is because there's an assumption on the part of Americans that our Declaration of Independence is being realized, i.e., we have equal opportunity, right? That's the only thing that's keeping us from revolution, is the assumption that we still have true equal opportunity and that we can advance past the circumstances that we're in. But there's a lot of talk going on, and there's not enough very concrete action. And I'm not talking about revolution necessarily. I'm not talking about violence and warfare, but I am talking about activist scenarios of program development, chasing the money, which is horrendously difficult. Ask me, I know we are very challenged, my organization. And so many other not-for-profits are terribly challenged. And of course, right now with the Washington policies towards this, it's worse than ever. But I have said this in many of my newsletters in the past year or so, that the worse it gets, the better the chances for change. So it's pretty bad. It's getting worse. It's going to get worse. But it's guys like you who kind of have a clue. I got to give you at least that much credit. I don't know totally if your ideas are doable and will make a difference, but you're as close as I've heard lately to come to a recognition of what we need to do. So you got to do it. You just plain got to do it. Who's going to do it? Who are the leaders that you're thinking are out there who are going to do this, if not you?
Yeah, I know we have 5 minutes left on this after to catch a 1 o'clock call. So I think I'll get my wrap up on this one. I know I'm a little long-winded. I think we are doing it. I think we are a group of people that's not waiting on anyone. I think Aron and I think Aron will throw some seeds off a back of a bike just so we could get some native plants growing if they don't want to give us permission. I went on supposedly trespassing and did a whole open protest on the land saying, y'all saying this day. I said, no, it's beautiful. Look at the birds and the dragonflies. Y'all tripping. And so I think that we are a spirit that's saying that we will collaborate with government, but we have an activism side with us too. And we balance the two by creating coalitions that we have, which we call the New Orleans East. We're working on a New Orleans East Community Water Plan, so we could decide from the community with community partners how we manage water inside and outside the levees. We have a variety of projects that we're working on, and we have a variety of partnerships. We have different type of organizations, from a co-op to an organization like Healthy Gulf that receive foundation funding to an organization like Song that receive a lot of federal funding in a mixed funding bags. We also have engineers on our team. It takes diversity, but it also takes a team that's intentionally invested in building community and honoring community. So a lot of our projects, we develop cohorts, and we make sure the funding that we get, that we honor that community member or that community-based organization's time by providing them funds. to have capacity for the organization and to participate in this. And we make sure we feed our cohort and our members as well. And we use that as cultural exchange of food, even language justice. Our last cohort, we had Spanish translation. We did not need Vietnamese translation because that person was bilingual. But we move it in intent. We want to hear these stories from the people in their own language so the stories can come out more genuine. And so we are moving forward. We're even pushing forward with challenging Sewage and Water Board and working with Sewage and Water Board in many different ways, sending many emails saying, let's do this. Let's move forward. Let's raise the bar. And we continue to work those relationships with Sewage and Water Board to move the bar. But building community power consistently and moving forward that way. So we are doing the work. We are the answer, but we believe in building diverse coalitions to do the work from a bottom-up centered community approach, but also moving government mindset and mind state as well, but involving cultural, but always having not a static process, but a process that always evolves along the way. This is not a coalition like a members only, but when we have other people that have ideas, like an artist that came to a workshop, hey, I have an idea to have a floating platform that we could have some biodiversity under that platform. Can we get some funding for that? Can we make that work? I have an idea, you are part of this cohort. I want to be a part of the Youth and Vision Project to help teach some of these to these youth. And so we populate this thing, and this plan is an ever evolving plan. It's not stagnant. We vision, we plan, we implement, and we come right back around. And just like the shoreline changes every day, we must adapt along with it as well. We move with intent. I believe, Janine, that's our thing. Knowing what the future holds and knowing what our people face, we move and we do what we can today to chip away at the process to us to adapt to climate change and man-made disasters.
Sage, Michael, thank goodness you're here, and Aron as well. If I need to let you go for the moment, I will. I sure hope that you will add me to your list, your communications list, so I know what you're doing when you're doing it, and I can continue to do what Aron knows I do.